I watched that Glasgow final a few times just to actually process what I saw, because a personal best by over a tenth of a second in a Commonwealth Games final in the rain, that's not a small jump. That's a completely different gear showing up exactly when it mattered most. Lachlan Kennedy runs 9.85 seconds, smashes his own PB, and in doing that, he breaks an Australian national record that had stood for 23 years. And I keep seeing this title getting thrown around, the fastest white sprinter alive. And honestly, I think it deserves more than just being repeated as a headline. I think it's worth actually breaking down, because once you look at the history behind that phrase, this whole story gets a lot heavier. Because here's the thing people don't realize, this club is tiny. Historically, it has been nearly impossible for a white athlete to reach the highest levels of sprinting. And when you actually go look at world rankings over the years, the last time anybody even got close to a top 10 finish was back in 2011, when Christophe Lemaitre ran 9.92, and even then he only finished 11th that season. Lemaitre ended up going sub-10 7 times across his career, and that's the actual record Kennedy is now chasing down. You've got Filippo Tortu from Italy going sub-10, Matthew Bowling running 9.98 for the United States, Cole Beck at 9.97, and Sam Blaskowski, who this year became the first athlete of European descent to break 9.90, running 9.89 at the Music City Track Carnival, briefly holding this exact title before Kennedy's Glasgow run took it right off him. That's the whole list. That's how thin this actually is, and that's exactly why what Kennedy just did carries so much weight. So let's actually walk through that final, because the way it played out deserves its own moment. Rain the entire day, cold conditions, and in the qualifying rounds, Emmanuel Assimi from Cameroon already puts up a 9.89, with Kennedy right behind him in 9.94, a brand new personal best at the time. Then the final happens, and Kennedy comes out of the blocks incredible, right alongside Kayinsola Ajayi from Nigeria, and they split through 60 meters together in 6.38 seconds, which is an absurdly quick opening for these conditions. For a moment, it genuinely looked like Kennedy was about to become Commonwealth champion, but over that final 10 to 20 meters, SMA comes through and takes the win in 9.83, a brand new Commonwealth Games record and Cameroon national record. Kennedy still crosses in 9.85, a new Australian record, a new Oceania record, and officially the fastest time a white sprinter has ever run. I don't see that as him fading at the line. I see that as him getting run down by a genuinely historic winning time and still walking away with history of his own. Now here's a piece of this story that I think gets completely buried, and it deserves way more attention than it gets. Kennedy was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at 15 years old. He manages it with a continuous glucose monitor and an insulin pump. And on race day, he actually has to remove that pump completely. Think about what that means in a sport where nanoseconds decide medals. If his blood sugar levels are even slightly off going into the call room, that can be the difference between standing on a podium and finishing outside the top 10. So every single time this man lines up, he's not just managing his blocks, his drive phase, his top end speed, he's managing his own body chemistry on top of all of it with zero room for error. That's a second full-time job that nobody else in that field has to think about, and I think it puts everything else he's accomplished in a completely different light. And on top of managing his own health, he's also racing in the shadow of a teammate who's getting most of the national attention. Gout is 18 years old, already a world under-20 record holder, and he's the name most casual fans know when they think Australian sprinting. But Kennedy has already beaten him twice, including over 200 meters at the Maury Plant meet earlier this year. And when Kennedy talks about gout, he says he wants the best for him, wants him running well, because it pushes both of them. But he also says flat out, he doesn't think he'll ever lose to him, and he says that's not arrogance, that's just real confidence in his own ability. That's a man carrying legitimate weight and expectation while somebody else gets most of the spotlight and still delivering when it counts. And I think it's worth pointing out, Kennedy set his own bar here too. Nobody handed him this pressure, he built it himself out loud. He said directly he wants to be the best sprinter Australia has ever had. Before Glasgow, he had Patrick Johnson's 23-year-old national record of 9.93 in his sights, and then he goes out and obliterates it. He's already talking about wanting an individual spot at LA 2028 after only running relay heats in Paris, and he's already thinking ahead to a home Olympics in Brisbane 2032, saying he can't even imagine what it'll feel like running in front of 60,000 people chanting his name. That's a man who put the target on his own back publicly and then had to go prove it under real live conditions, not in a comfortable, controlled environment. Now let's talk about how he actually got here, because this isn't some guy who was destined for track from day one. He was a rugby union player as a teenager, playing for junior representative sides in Brisbane, and it wasn't until 17 that his rugby coach pushed him to run a school relay, and that's when everyone realized just how fast he actually was. He switched sports, climbed the ranks quickly, picked up a world indoor silver in the 60 meters last year in Nanjing at 6.50, became the second Australian ever to break 10 seconds legally when he ran 9.98 in Nairobi, then became the first first to do it on home soil in Sydney this year with a 9.96. And somehow, through all of this, he's also studying engineering and business at Griffith University. This is a guy managing elite training, a chronic health condition, and a university degree all at the same time. And I think that combination alone tells you everything about his discipline. And honestly, when I look at how people reacted to that Glasgow run, I feel exactly the same way they do. People are calling it the best Australian male 100-meter performance they've ever watched, saying he keeps proving doubters wrong, calling it mastery of sprinting, peaking exactly when it counts. And I agree with every bit of that. Running your best time ever in a major final, in the rain, against a field that includes an NCAA champion and multiple sub 9.90 Africans, that's not luck. That's a man who trained specifically for the moments where everything is on the line. So let's bring this all the way home. The fastest white sprinter title is genuinely rare, historically thin. Only a handful of names have ever legitimately held it, and Kennedy just took it from Sam Blaskowski under about as much pressure as this sport can throw at somebody. Rain, a stacked international field, a health condition most competitors never have to think about, and a national spotlight that's partly pointed at a teenager instead of him. And he still delivered the run of his life exactly when it mattered. I rest my case. Let me know in the comments where you think Kennedy goes from here, because I read every single one of them. And as always, fast is a lifestyle. And if you rock with what we're doing here, go ahead and like and subscribe. I'd greatly appreciate it.